Welcome everyone to a video on the key lighting effects that I use on my scenes when I pretty much have them figured out and all I need to do is sort of unify them and make them look like they exist in the same space. If this video goes a little bit too fast for you, I encourage you to re-watch it, or I will also have a link in the description below to a video that covers a lot of the fundamentals that this video uses for lighting. First, I'm going to create a group for the part 1 for the lighting, which is diffusion. And in that group, you're going to put in a layer that's your shadows. To create contrast in the shadows, I go to Image, Adjustments, Levels. And you want to create a difference between your darkest region and your next gray area. And delete that darkest region in order to just have a layer with the whites. And you bring over a layer with your people, and that person, you're going to also adjust the levels. And this is going to help you to select the silhouette of that person and delete them out of your lighting layer. So again, adjustment levels for the person to turn them completely into a silhouette, and using the magic wand tool to then select that silhouette, and once having the lighting layer selected, you delete them away from that area. I'm about to repeat this process with all of the people, but what I'm going to do is actually duplicate them all together and flatten them into, or merge them rather, into one single image. And simply do the same thing. Adjust the levels to turn them all into silhouettes and then delete them out of the lighting layer, which is your shadows layer that we took away the dark areas from. At this time, I'm going to rename the shadows layer to light areas or something similar. And we're going to duplicate that light areas layer in order to create the diffusion effect. But before we do so, I'm going to take away the light areas from the sky. And the reason is I want to affect the diffusion of the building differently than how I want to show the lighting to happen in the background. This copy layer I'm going to rename to the diffusion parentheses Gaussian blur, which is the effect I'm about to apply on this layer by going to Image, Adjustments, Gaussian blur, and setting a radius that leaves the lighting in the zones where there are, but blends between those areas and their voids. Now the blend mode to use here really depends on what style or what kind of image you're working with. I ended up deciding that I liked 2 of the blend modes, so I duplicated that layer again and I gave it a different one. Here I'm using color dodge and screen. Remember, you can always use opacity to decrease or increase the intensity of those effects. Part 2 of this video is directional light, which is mostly made up by sunlight, although you can also use this technique coming from artificial lighting that you may have in the building. You want to use the polyline tool to select out the areas in which you might have sun rays seeping into your spaces. You can use feathering also to blend out those borders so they're not so harsh. The feathering option is found at the top right under your select on your toolbar, and the intensity of that feathering effect will change how much what you paint inside that border will seep onto the outsides. Now in CC you'll have to set your feathering and then draw your selection and then redo it with a new feathering setting to see the difference. Once you have a good level of feathering that you like, you use a white brush to fill in the area. You can always use an eraser later to also change the diffusion around that directional light. For an example on how to draw these directional lights, you can look up images of God rays. It's what's used in video games or in CGI in order to have sun rays seeping through openings. I'm going to create a strong streak on the left side where there's the most blockage of sunlight, and I'll create a gradient with the brush kind of coning out and having less intensity at the bottom. Now I'm going to repeat this process for all the other areas where you may have openings where light will spill into darker areas. Remember to use opacity to change the intensity of these different areas and to keep them all on separate areas so you can control them independently. Now this last part of the video is going to deal with ambient, and the reason why I'm going to talk about the background a little bit here is because ambient really deals with overall lighting and tone set in the image, and the background is a really big part of that. So here I've taken a faraway image, kind of seeming like we're on the top of a hill or something like that. You can always pull better images or have a background that you render with, but here I'm just kind of collaging a little bit. The first thing I'm going to do to the background layers is decrease the saturation, play with their brightness and contrast. All these settings are accessible from your toolbar at the top where you hit Image Adjustments. The goal here isn't anything really specific. There's an inclination for more realism and for the sense of depth to put things that are further away, more desaturated, a little bit lighter, a little bit blurry, and a little bit just more bland, and things that are closer to the viewer are sharper, they have more color, and they're better lit. How you set up the main part of your render, like I've done here with the building, is going to dictate what the background looks like. The cool thing is that with these settings, there's a variety of things that work. It really depends on how you set up your initial render. That's going to dictate how you treat your background and how you play with all these different components. The second part to the ambient section would be the temperature. And here I've created two layers, a warm layer and a cool layer. The warm layer, I'm going to use warm tones, reds, yellows, oranges, from where the sun is originating. And an area that's more sheltered or more covered, I'm going to then use a cooler color, such as a light blue, a green, and purple. Once I set the blend mode to overlay, I'm then going to play with the opacity to change the intensity. Now you have all the components that you can control for lighting in different groups, and you can go back to them and tweak them as you need. So you save a lot of time in having to nitpick things that aren't really making the image come together. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, please hit the like button and leave a comment. Let me know what you think.